Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of AI Insiders by AI Marketers Guild and Marketecture Media. Great to have all of you here, and I'm here with an old friend of sorts. We're old friends now, aren't we, David?
I
So
think we're old friends. 10
okay,
years. 10, 15 years is plenty.
yeah, at least because you and I got to know each other when you were running Philo, that social TV startup, and I was at 360i. I remember grabbing lunch around the Tribeca offices there, so I could like kind of picture the exact time and place of that era, and some of the
Makes
then like
sense.
weird but super cool things you were trying to do in that
Bang.
fun. I don't know, like back when social was like scalable but also weird, and not just eyeballs. So that was pretty fun. But then yeah, being one of the people that I've stayed in touch with better than others, and get to have an ongoing check-in with to understand like what's going on with tech, with what's going on with markets. Like way too much about a lot of things. And so since I've been able to learn so much from you, I figured it's time the community gets to do the same. So welcome.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I would consider myself one, great at cocktail parties, so I can talk about a bunch of different topics, but only so deep, and then I have to run away. Or a decathlete, which you probably heard as someone who's not good at 10 things. So those are my dad jokes over. I guess the quick and dirty my background, and hopefully this is more quick and less dirty, is I did start off as a banker and investor in growth and tech. I did that for 10 years. I left. I started two companies because I thought that would be more fun, more lucrative, more interesting. I was one out of three on that. The first company was a retail company. The second was the social TV company. We were hot for like a white for like, we were like white hot for like a hot second, I'd say. And of the early social TV companies, we had the highest dollar return for our investors in that I only lost $1 million, and my competitors lost 10 to $20 million. So ta-da! But after that, I did some EIO for a couple of corporate venture funds. One was Lorne Michaels' corporate venture fund. That was
Oh yeah.
never met him, but I spent time in his office, and some interesting characters would walk by. And I was the EIR at Comcast Ventures for a year, and I kind of fell into uh, a spot at AWS where I co-built the startup engagement team there, starting in 2014. I was there for the better part of 10 years. I left halfway through that. I did the same thing at Stripe. I stayed there for a year and a day. Interesting spot. But wasn't for me. I went back to AWS. Our group had gone from 14 people when I joined to, I don't know, 150 when I left the first time. And by the time I got back, it was in the thousands. Turned mostly into a sales team, and all of us kind of like overpaid uh, ex-entrepreneur venture capitalists looking around, and kind of some of us like me overstayed our welcome. But I left that world 2 or 3 years ago, and I've been focused on pretty much most anything in AI infrastructure, digital infrastructure, down to from chips to um, cloud infrastructure and other infrastructure to optimization tools on top of that, and a little bit playing around with some of the apps that we're seeing now. And one of the things that David and I have always talked about is it used to be that like when I was a Wall Street analyst, earlier stage companies would use whatever they used, and then it was large company CIOs, CTOs, et cetera, that were dictating the enterprise software applications and infrastructure that they would use. So that's where you got your signals. Uh, that flipped, and that flipped. From my perspective, I don't know when it flipped for real, but from my perspective, it flipped right around when I was at AWS. The numbers I'll use are uh, functionally 100% of startups were using cloud, but only 10% of enterprise IT spend was cloud. Obviously, that changed pretty dramatically. I went to Stripe. The weirdest thing in 2018 when I went to Stripe, and Stripe is a very odd place. So there was a lot to be weird about. But the weirdest thing was they were using G Suite as their internal email system, which doesn't sound weird now. But then for a multi-billion-dollar company was very strange. And what we started to realize, and what I've realized recently, is that you can tell what enterprises are going to use um, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now by looking at startups. And I don't necessarily mean the startups that are using startup products. Sometimes it's startup products, but not always. And the key, the reason is not so much like startups are brilliant, which I do think they are, but it's out of necessity. One, they have no technical debt, and two, they don't really have any options but to use platforms that are very easily get up and running quickly.
So, so what does that mean today? What's popping up on marketers' tech stacks now? What are startups using?
You tell me. And I could tell you, like, so starting with tools, and this might starting with like I'll call them infrastructure tools, and I think this lends itself well to what's happening in the marketing world. There was a piece that came out from Business Insider. My old group, there was a leaked memo. I have nothing to do. I was long gone by this point, and there was a whole bunch of stuff. But like the key point that I saw was that they said that for the first time, startups were choosing their AI models and tools before they were choosing their cloud infrastructure provider. Kind of a boring statement. But having spent the better part of 10 years at AWS, that was a monumental change because we had been so early and we were in every company so early. And so we could really kind of say influence how adoption of other things went. And now you're seeing something different. So you're seeing, companies are choosing whether they're using OpenAI's API, whether they're using Claude Code, or their own GPUs or GPU infrastructure. You're seeing that happen now, and that happens before they start to choose other platforms. And the reason I think that might be important for marketers is that I think the tools that people are using today, they're likely choosing tools first that they wouldn't choose before. And yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys are seeing. I know some general categories where it's kind of stupidly obvious. Customer service is the first one that comes to mind, or maybe the second one. The first one is Claude Code, but that's less to do with marketing. But anything on customer service, anything on sales automation, that's what I'm seeing like first. And it's because startups can't hire 100 salespeople. They can't hire or outsource to a call center. But yeah, I mean, that, and then anything that's kind of like agency or agency adjacent, writing copy, automating all these, this outreach.
So, and then like, I mean, with things like sales automation, or even just like a lot of sales automation, marketing automation, like CRM, are there some things like what you saw with the Google Suite that are starting to stand out there that are becoming go-to options?
It's a little hard to tell right away. What I don't hear. I don't hear as much. I can tell you what I don't hear as much as I used to. I don't hear people like jumping onto, and this is a adopted hometown favorite, but I don't hear people jumping onto HubSpot so quickly, or Klaviyo, however you pronounce it, so quickly. And so presumably there are platforms out there that are doing this much more effectively, or using artificial intelligence to make it easier. Have you seen any of those? I can when I hear names, I can tell you what comes up, but I'm curious what you're seeing.
Well, I'm curious, a lot of it is there's tried to tap into the AI tech from existing tools, like seeing if that can get folks further along. Like on the CRM side of things, like Clay pops up a lot.
Yeah. Yep. Clay is one for sure. I mean, here, like on like company platform types of thing, Clay for sure. But that's been going on for a while. I think if you ask most enterprises what Clay is, they'll be oh, my kid plays with it, having no idea that this is what it is. This isn't the marketing side, but every startup I know uses Rippling or something like it, not ADT or some platform that has like a like Windows 3.1 interface type thing. There's all, I mean, you're seeing the Salesforces, et cetera, of the world add all this functionality, and it's super cool. But if you're a startup, like installing at AWS, we had a department that managed our Salesforce instances.
Okay.
Like AWS had a team, not just like a person, a team. And so, as much as they'll adopt AI for their existing customers and enterprises, it's what's going to happen with these newer companies is anybody's guess. But I think we can make some good guesses by seeing what there is. I'm sorry, I was seeing some questions about Llama. Yes, Llama's certainly getting a lot of traction. There's some limitations to it, but the open source stuff is free. You'll see a lot of the inference players are moving towards these open models because they can't run the closed models on their systems. And ditto regarding the Chinese open LLM is just, there's some very, very significant security concerns, and they persist even on closed systems.
So for things like, I mean, you don't hear about Meta as much and what's going on with Llama. Like are there certain kinds of businesses that are adopting it more, and like what are they even mainly using it for?
Llama itself?
Yeah.
Or other LLMs? Yeah, I mean, anybody who's kind of building their, there's two ways that you can kind of like, for lack of a better, there's three ways you can build your own model. And I'm saying that in air quotes for a reason. So one is you can build your own model. That is a lot of work. It requires a lot of expertise, and perhaps most importantly, it requires an enormous amount of compute. And that's when you're going to a CoreWeave or even AWS or one of the other clouds. Very expensive. That's number one. On the other hand, on the way end of the spectrum, you have folks doing these kind of like RAG limitations, which is taking an OpenAI or taking Anthropic, and I forget what it stands for. It doesn't really matter, but it's kind of like putting a shell around it and being able to, it's like reinforcement augmented, generative. But
retrieval.
It's really cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm supposed to know that, but I don't, and I'm not going to Google it right now because we're on.
Retrieval augmented generation.
So there you go. Thank you. Was that clearly telling you that?
That was Google AI overview. So
there you go. Nice. And then in the middle, you've got folks using open source models. And so, you can use an open source model and tweak it to any type of dynamic you want. You're still going to you're getting like a head start on building a model from scratch. You're still going to have compute overhead, et cetera. But I think I don't want to call them more serious engineers, and I don't think that's fair, but folks who need more fine tuning of a model but don't want to build a model from scratch will begin with an open source model. Yes, openrouter.ai. Holy cow. I see in the chat we have somebody talking about a good tracker for AI model usage. I had been looking for the built with or intricately for AI models for a long time. I went as far as to try to build something that looked into website code automatically to see if it can figure out who's using OpenAI calls or who's using Anthropic calls. And I couldn't find it. I, in fact, spoke to my friends of mine at OpenAI and Anthropic. They're like, I have no idea. But this open router data it's just amazing. I was trying to kind of build this, let's see what the adoption is going to look like early. And then I looked at open router. I'm like, well, they did that. That's good. All right, onward. Um, so that's a really good way to see, what people are doing with models right now. I think it's popped up and down, and it's pretty wild to watch. Um, then the more, let's get back to the marketing side. Like, the early things that I had heard about, and I just don't know how they're playing out, are, the obvious things like CRM, cold outreach, etc. A bunch of voice AI type stuff. I don't know if anybody's received a AI phone call yet. I think I got one. Uh, it's pretty wild. Like, you still know, but it's getting close enough where it's not. It's getting harder to distinguish. And so, um, where I'm seeing a little bit more traction on that is in international markets. Um, um, but yeah, I mean, like, it's, I think what I've seen is like the kind of like direct outreach, SDR type stuff, showing up first.
Yeah, those calls, like once you realize, okay, this is not a real person, and it's not
The
one of those
pause,
the
the
yeah,
pause.
the pause. I mean, and some of those,
It's
like,
like,
they're not even AI, right? Like, it's just like it's like a timer, you know?
yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, it's interesting though. I mean, because have you or any of you like interacted with any of the models or chatbots with your voice? But like, have you used ChatGPT? Have you used Bot, etc.?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and and heck, even in some other applications of it, like I've mentioned,
Rosebud.
I've mentioned Rosebud here, and David's the guy who introduced me to it. So I love
I
talking to
haven't used
Rosebud.
Rosebud for voice wise yet, but I use it text wise every single day, at least once a day, if not several times a day. Um, yeah, and David, you can explain what. Long story short, is a therapy app, but it's more like a journaling type
Yeah.
therapy. And anybody that I've shared it with anybody with whom I've shared it has come back and said, "Oh my God, this is borderline." I think David, the word you used was addictive. Ironic given its context. But yeah, it's I realized that this is marketing related. I realized that it was very, it was becoming more easy and normal to use voice AI to engage when I was trying to I created a logo for my little advisory group. And I was using ChatGPT as walking through the airport, and I was like, if I put it on chat mode and put the AirPod in my ear, nobody's going to know who I'm talking to, and it nailed it. Like, first it was a normal conversation, and it nailed it. I've used it to prepare for discussions. Not this one, I probably should have. I've used it to prepare for interviews. It's a very good way to use it. And I think, like, as we become more accustomed and more okay with um, using those for our own use, I think that'll drop the barrier to when you get a call that's AI, as long as it's not, spam is spam. But like, I think we'd get more comfortable engaging with voice AI as we use it more on our own personal lives.
And one of the things I've found so helpful for is after an in-person meeting, and now I'm like, yeah, full of a bunch of ideas. I've got some follow-up things, and I'll just like as I'm walking out, I'll just start talking. I'm like, okay, tell like ChatGPT or Gemini, I just basically start and said, oh, remember this, remember that, and then like have a 5-minute conversation so that when I'm back at my desk, I haven't forgotten all the things that
Yeah,
I've forgotten.
yeah. Um, the other place I've seen a handful of companies, I just don't know the traction yet, is I guess they're like, I call this agency adjacent, at least.
Mm.
And sorry, I missed that. I'll get to you in 1 second. But as these platforms that will build your marketing campaign, build the copy, and get you like 80% the way. It's pretty wild. I know 2048 invested in one that was in Techstars, New York, called, I wish I remember the name. I'll find the name. With an R, I think. But I assume there's a handful of those. I just haven't seen what's gained traction yet and what hasn't. And if folks are going to work with the agencies or if they're going to look to replace agencies or what have you. Earl, hands up.
Sure. Thanks so much for David. So one of the things, everybody who knows me in the space, I push custom GPTs all the time. Going back to your questions of use cases of like using them through talking to one of your custom GPTs. One of the recent use cases I've had was I've actually been exploring Linux since all the news with Windows 11 and people making a migration because of some of the limitations. So what weekend project I had last weekend was setting up Linux on one of my machines, and I used a custom GPT and I spoke to it as I was going through the installation and configuration process. So that way I can keep hands free and navigate on my new machine, just making sure that everything's set up. But I can literally ask questions when I run into issues or add questions regarding any issues I ran into during the installation, configuration, migration process. So it's a great use case. I even used it one time to help me clean the bathroom and making sure I didn't miss a spot. So it's one of those things the ways you can come up with ways to speak to somebody knowledgeable. It's great.
I'm trying to look for that AI creation. I couldn't find that one. But I did find, quick lists of things like Jasper. Figma's an obvious one. Pretis.
So, I mean, I'm even curious with some things like Jasper is a good example where I was a client needed some SEO optimized long form copy, and I started testing Jasper and Writer and a few of these tools. And then it was before Gemini 3 came out, 2.5, I can't remember all the numbering systems, but I was asking ChatGPT and Gemini, I'm like, can you do stuff with these very specific parameters and like the exact, like word density and all these kinds of things that SEO folks tell you need to be there. And they had someone who was like, here's what the content needs to look like, whether it's right or wrong. I didn't care. I just needed to do it. And I tried Jasper, I tried Writer, and then I tried Gemini, and Gemini was way better at following instructions. And I'm like, wait a second, I don't even need to pay for this extra thing. The thing I'm already paying $20 a month for is better than a lot of what's out there. And I'm curious where some of those areas are gonna like just obviate. Like I stopped paying for Ideogram, which I've loved for a lot of image generation. Gemini and sometimes ChatGPT now, like they just do it better. And I still like riffing on Ideogram sometimes, but some of these things like maybe you think they have their niches, and now the major LLMs keep expanding their pool of what can be done.
I think that's a really good point. I'm trying to figure out a way to start this part of the discussion or answers without using the word agentic. Can we come up with a better word for agent or agentic? Well, I'll use it for now. So for what it's worth, like my own personal definition of agentic is when models are prompting models. But I'm not going to use that right now. Sort of. I kind of didn't get it at first. I mean, I got it like, oh yeah, somebody's going to go out and do stuff for you. I used Manus, and I was like an early, I wouldn't say an early power user, but an early user that paid them a lot of money. And so they sent me a t-shirt, just terrific. And so awesome. And then I got acquired by Facebook, of course. But like when I asked myself, why the heck am I using this when I can use, ChatGPT or Gemini? And yeah, digital worker. I like it. Digital worker, not agentic. So if a chatbot agent or a chatbot digital worker, here we go, is able to more effectively utilize different models, et cetera, to figure stuff out and create stuff for me, it's better. And when I do have more involved things to do, I do go to Manus, and it is a much more effective platform for me. And so like I just put in the chat here that Techstars New York 2048 ventures backed company was called Ripple.ai, GetRipple.ai. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but now it's describing itself as a marketing automation agent. But if you have these digital worker-esque, if you have these agentic tools that are able to use the best of different models with different capabilities and their own, you can have a 1 + 1 = 3. But I don't disagree with you on the models keep broadening out and broadening out and broadening out. And there's a company here. There's a company I work with called Polymathic, and it's has nothing to do with marketing. It's AI for science, for lack of a better term, but it's a bunch of astrophysicists and other PhDs that built the thermodynamics model. Can ChatGPT and OpenAI build those types of models? Yeah, but those cases are not nearly as good. But when they're special sauce, for lack of a better term. I know we hate that term too, but it's retro, so I can use it. Is they have their own foundation model, and their agent can go and pick the best thing to do for a scientist to more effectively complete a very, very, very set of complex tasks. And so, I think that's where these either agentic or wrapper type platforms need to be. They need to be in a place where they're going to unlock more value than using a single platform.
Yeah, there's Selena's wondering digital worker instead of agentic, and
but I think that's an interesting distinction. Like the digital worker is that thing that goes out there and kind of does things for you. When I think of agentic, where I think the real profound implication is for infrastructure, everything else is when right now you have human, and stop me if this gets too technically boring, but do it nicely so I don't get offended. But when you have humans like us prompting a model, asking questions, asking to do things, that type of activity is going to grow. There's more, and it's stupidly obvious. It's okay, well, people are using more users using Chat GPT and other platforms more often. But when the models themselves that you're prompting start to go do things and prompt other models, they can do that all the time. They can do it much more frequently, and will do it much more frequently and much more quickly. And so all of a sudden, the number of inference calls and token consumption goes practically vertical. And so, is that when Skynet becomes alive? But I think that's where I'll make the distinction between agentic AI infrastructure and digital worker. I'm going to use that term, digital worker, to describe this type of flow. A2A digital worker is becoming the nomenclature in Silicon Valley. Terrific. Well, that means they do dictate our vernacular right now. So, but what are other folks in here? I'd love to see. I started to put together a list of AI native marketing tools. Is anybody using one of them already? Something that 2 years ago they did not use, but now they are using liberally. Whether it's for if it's another area like some of the other area, but if it's in customer outreach, branding, copywriting, and it's not called one of the models other we all know the models. What are the other tools?
I mean, the one I probably use most, I want to hear from others here, is Happenstance. I mean, it's more biz dev than marketing, but I'm on there all the time.
Talk more about that.
So, and anyone's welcome to connect with me there too. So just put the link in there. But Happenstance is basically a smarter way to search your network or to search the network of a group of people you're in. So I'm in one of these marketing agency collectives, and now we've got a group on Happenstance where we could search each other's networks. But it's also just so useful for me to say, I'm looking for brand marketers at companies between 1,000 and 5,000 people that are doing that are in the D2C e-commerce space. And I'll give it some of these criteria, and it can search whether it's my network or for people who have opted in and connected with. Then like I use this stuff all the time. Like often, one of the biggest use cases I also find it's helpful with is for investors, because I never remember who I know in my network who invests in what. And even if I know that you're an investor, like, are you pre-seed or seed or A or B? Are you are you, it's very easy if you're aligned with a VC firm and there's like a clear thesis that they put out there. But a lot of the folks I know who invest are not part of an institution. And so it's like, but there might be some info that they've shared out there that like is just like kind of hidden on their LinkedIn profile, that along with running this company, they're a pre-seed investor in in like agritech, and I sure as hell won't know that. So anyway,
sounds like a next gen Hashable up in New York.
I miss Hashable.
Awesome flame out. Yeah, I miss it too.
Eric, do you want to share anything about Go Marble?
I use synthetic audiences a lot. I don't know if that's relevant to what you're asking.
Yeah, sure.
But synthetic audiences I find very useful for content creation, creating surveys, adding the results to build content. They're extremely useful tools.
And are you using like Rally or an existing platform, or did you build your own?
I use Ask Rally, and I just started using Navara from Jill, who presented. So that's a little more complicated. I like to understand it, but they have features for generating content. Ask Rally, basically what I do is I create surveys. I ask the audience, they take them to a survey, and then take the output, put it in Gemini, for example, ask for an analysis, and then I can use that to generate my content.
That is awesome. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, and the other thing I do is I, for example, research. This other tool I use for researching prompts. What are people searching for, and then using that and Ask Rally to generate surveys, and then using all of that to create content.
Sorry, did you say there's something that tells you what prompts people are using? Or
yes, I'll tell you in a second what that is.
Yeah. While you do that, I can bring up another angle that I've seen AI in the marketing space is it's kind of the flip side, which is not how do you use AI, but how do you limit or avoid it altogether. I know there's a bunch of companies that are like, is your brand being used properly, et cetera. There is a company I advised for a while. It's now called Voight. I'll put the URL in here. Forgive my Techstars plug again, but this is the Techstars LA company. They're a workflow to make sure that AI imagery doesn't end up in companies' brands. And where they became like very well known was in things like Magic the Gathering. So they have a big contract with Wizards of the Coast and video games, et cetera, to make sure that people aren't sneaking AI generated content into their actual IP. So in those fan bases and those groups, there are very significant problems if it's not original content. And so I think like brand management for sure is something I've seen.
Yeah, the company is called Gumshoe AI.
Oh, nice.
Of course. Yeah.
And as we're talking about things for researching prompts, like the two that I've spent some time with are Otterly and Passion Fruit, and those are pretty good. And what I'll also, by the way, share in the chat is I updated my own collection of a lot of resources. So not everything that's been discussed here is on this, but some of them are. So feel free to check that out and recommend others that should be there. And
I was about to ask you if you had that, so I'm glad you.
I have it, and I realized that, you know, with my vibe coding obsession on base 44, and I checked a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, shit, I've got so many more credits for this month than I realized. And so it's funny, like often there's this fear of running out of them, and I'm like, I was being way too conservative with it. So I just started vibe coding everything. Like Dave, I put something in the chat that I didn't even show you yet, that I was like, could I actually vibe code an alternative to Rosebud? And it's so I created innervoice.me, and it's like, it's not great, but it kind of works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's another really great thread, whether it's vibe coding or things like Lovable, which David, you and I have talked about. I know you adore it, I guess is the better word. You guys love Lovable. But yeah, you know, how are marketers using platforms like that? Lovable seems more targeted at folks that are doing things that are more marketing and
it's really good.
Heavy. Are you like, how would you line up like Lovable, Replit, Verso, and all of these thousands of others? One Figma.
I mean, for me, I think that for some of them, one of the biggest factors is how technically savvy you need to be to use them, and so base 44 versus Lovable for me, I mean, to me, I still like those two as the first entry points, and you can get something pretty competently done, like just even with the free trial. But then as you get into other things, like even with Lovable, it helps once you start asking it to do something more complicated. It's like, okay, register for Supabase, register for GitHub, and it'll tell you how to do these things. And a lot of these other platforms are free, especially if you're not launching a major consumer product. But it's like then for me, base 44 is like the fewest number of other things I need to use. And I just realized, for instance, that they have back-end functions, they have agent mode that you have to manually turn on. But once you do that, like originally I was using FormSpree that both base 44 and Lovable recommended as an email capture thing to sync with. It was like pretty easy and cheap. And then one day base 44 was like, yeah, I can do that as part of it. So you don't need to go somewhere else for this. So, but then, I've tried Replit, I've tried Vercel, I've tried some of Google's own tools. Like, I really want to learn how to use Claude Code, and I have it downloaded. And I wrote this last week in the AI brief of using Claude Code and Ghosty as the terminal and Netlify as. So I've gone down all of this. But to me, Claude Code, like I'm learning Korean on Duolingo right now, and Claude Code is harder for me to understand than the Korean alphabet.
That's something. A data point I'll give you is a twice exited founder CTO I know is using Claude Code, like lots of developers. He pays $200 a month, so $2,400 a year, and he's getting the equivalent of $2 million. And he knows these numbers because he's run large engineering orgs. He's getting $2 million worth of $2 million in annual developer work done for $2,400, but also inside of a week. And so when I hear things like, "Oh, enterprise adoption is so slow with AI," I mean, that may be the case, but at some point when you have these ROIs that are orders of magnitude, it's just too hard to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
And David, do you see the line between, now that you have all these, we used to call it no code. Now it's not even vibe coding. And these are like, hey, what do you want to do? Like, are you seeing the line between what is development and what is agency and what is developer blurring and like t-shirt. Yeah, I mean, like, how does that all fall out?
Yeah, well,
Who's doing what?
Like I have a freelance developer who I use for all my personal stuff on Upwork, and I took my main site for consulting back from him. Like I vibe coded it, I gave it to him, he put it on WordPress, he did all the things that any smart developer is doing. I trust him. And then I'm like, this is too slow for me to tell you what I want done. Even if like WordPress has some better SEO functions and things like that. I've literally the stuff I was just doing yesterday on Base 44 was telling it to build sitemaps for me, and then I was going and submitting them in Google Search Console. So these things that now there's a lot of like the quick hit stuff that I don't need developers to do, and for more involved things like I vibe coded a page for a content project I'm working on with a client. And so like they didn't ask for this. They didn't ask for anything like this. I gave maybe a few things they really didn't want in the process, but I was able to bring this to life for them. And I'm like, okay, great. Now you can go and put this as a page on your own site, however the heck you want. I just gave you a whole vision for it and this functioning version. So it's like this speed to developer, like I wouldn't trust myself or a typical marketer for like a really important like interactive thing that has to work. But there's all this stuff like coming from the agency side. Okay, there were all these things that even just for the own agency marketing, let alone doing client work, where it would just be this whole big resource discussion. And do you spend months in meetings trying to get something done just for some like quick hit, like some like wacky idea that you just want to bring to life so that you could go and in earlier, maybe less crazy days, you'd actually just like put it out in a tweet and just like see if it bites. Now you can just do that shit in a couple hours or a couple minutes. Like that kind of stuff for a creative person, for even an account manager to just like run something by a client and say like, what about this? Like, can we do something like this? Like that's way better than creating 50 slides about it, I think.
Yeah, as long as you're talking about, like client work, if I feel like we went from, in Web 1, it was like, it was SEO. And then obviously in like social media times, they refused to use the term Web 2. It was, how do you get your stuff in the socials? And now with David, I think you told me they were calling it GEO.
Yeah,
or whatever the heck it's called.
There's
like,
so many of these.
I read something a year ago or 2 years ago, and I was like, let's call it SEALMO. It was like SCAI. It was a joke. LLM optimization. It was a joke, but like, it seems like that's a thing. And and like, this is where we're going, Daniel. I see your question about compensation models for AI powered by creatives. Like, what's if publishers need to, or content creators need to have their stuff show up in models because that's where everybody's looking for them now, but how are they getting compensated for that? Like, how do you think that plays out? I have some ideas. I don't know, like you could see what OpenAI is starting to do now. It's, some revenue generation, but what's the AEO, but what's the how do you see that working out? I mean, the SEO or social media optimization is pretty like, oh, you can get more stuff in and you get more traffic. This is not traffic. This is content. This is content generated on your content.
Yeah. Although there's, I guess it depends what business you're in, because the trends that we've seen are fewer clicks, but those clicks become more valuable. And so even now, actually, a reporter was just asking me about the ChatGPT ad business model, and was hearing something about a $60 CPM, which sounds absurd, especially when they should be able to charge potentially obscenely high CPCs compared to what people are paying if in fact the intent coming from AI is higher. And
Yeah.
so that whole business, like I just, given how shitty AI has seemed to be for general branding, not that it doesn't influence brand, but branding in the, like, okay, like you mentioned a brand and like, are you going to get more traffic from that? Are you going to get more engagement? But it can be really good when it's tied to actions. So
Yeah. I think my opinion, right or wrong, is that OpenAI's business model is ultimately predicated on selling tokens, not ads. I mean, I could be 1,000% wrong on that. But the markup on a token is basically 2x, and so you have a 50% margin. And I think they said that something like 40% of their revenue is now from API access. It was a quarter. I thought it was 75%. I was wrong, but I'm getting less wrong as time goes on, which is nice. It'll be interesting to see what their ad model looks. I mean, I heard people talking about it yesterday about this new product, and they're like, "We don't know what the product is. It's new." Like, okay. What do you say? Like, if like, I think 20, 30 years ago, when somebody was using Oracle for their CRM, and you'd say, "God, I'll never be replaced," and then now within the last 10, 20 years, it's like, well, obviously it's Salesforce, and that's platforms like that. If we had to look forward like 20 years from now, what are I obviously things will change, but what are the big names in marketing technology look like? What gets replaced?
Well, curious what others here would place bets on and are thinking like just beyond the rich getting richer. Yeah. And I mean, Manus was a fascinating one because it was one that I saw that kept popping up as like definitely a favorite of a lot of marketers out there. And I feel like so many of these things like that have gotten some degree of traction. If you look at Jasper Writer, or you look at say Beautiful AI or Gamma, which both of them have probably had the most traction on the whole, like what's the new PowerPoint kind of thing. But then if Gemini and if Google and Microsoft don't just flat out acquire those, like they'll build their own versions of them into it. I'd just be skeptical that there are some of these point solution things that are viable for the long haul, especially when anything's competing with part of like the Google or Microsoft Office suite. And just because Microsoft tends to neglect, say, things like user experience in Office today doesn't mean they're not looking at every single one of these and are going to, and won't place a bet for the rest of the decade. Yeah.
Well, I actually said this to an EVP at Microsoft about 5 years ago, because they were thinking about like how do we think about like our startup engagement. This was a guy who was he reported to Satya, so he wasn't like, I didn't care about startups, but I said, look, you don't have to make another nickel in Azure or from Azure, but you need to know what all their like startups are using. This is like the thread we started with, because this is what your enterprise is going to be using 5 years from now. And that's what we like. Google is not a tiny company by any stretch, but I don't know what the market share numbers are now, but I would suspect that G Suite has a material market share in like your internal email systems and documents. So, and like what I think was like very different when cloud happened, Microsoft was like, sweet, let's put Word on the web. Google was like, I think they acquired into it, but it's like, let's not just put some word processor and give you web access. What is a truly native cloud-based word processor document sharing system look like? I think the questions being asked now are not like, how do you add AI to Salesforce, or how do you add AI to Excel or G Suite? But what are the native, I don't even know what that, what is a native AI analysis look like? What does the native AI, how does this all look, if we don't start with the tools we use now?
Yeah. Jim, you have something?
Holy shit. That's a big market share.
I know your question was, what are the big names in marketing technology in the next 10 years? But what I'd like to do is revisit something slightly adjacent to what you said at the very beginning, when you took an interest in, what are people using now? And that adoption curve explodes over the next 5 years, right? And I do M&A, and I advise on mostly the sell side. And I'm in outreach right now for a company I'm selling in. It's based in Paris. And I discovered a company, I'm going to drop it in the chat, that is so refreshing and so unique. It's called Fleet DM, okay? And the reason I discovered them is because their ethos is 100% remote, no offices. They have like a post office box in San Francisco. And the company I'm selling is the same way. And it's in emulation and virtualization. It's very high tech stuff. But these companies are operationally aligned, totally cloud first, distributed delivery, distributed management. And in order to decide whether or not to contact them, and I did, you find out that their CFO is in venture, and she's amazing, but she's not on site. And the guy that they have running it, who actually is running corporate finance over there, is a specialist in building remote organizations. And if you surf around their site, completely transparent. It's so refreshing to see a company that says, we're doing it this way because it's transparent. You can trust it. We can move fast. We're not encumbered by anything that's legacy. And I think that's kind of what you were, hinting at, was when at the beginning, when you were saying, what's going to move fastest? Cloud. What are these guys using before anybody else? XYZ. This is the same kind of company. It's so, I discovered this last week, and I can't stop thinking about it, because this is the future org chart.
Yeah, Jim, we should connect offline on M&A. I do a lot of M&A advisory.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was Jim, I was hoping you'd chime in at some point. You never disappoint. David, you don't disappoint too often either. You sure didn't today. So appreciate you coming. We're hitting the hour mark. Be great for others to stay in touch with you and have you back sharing more of your ideas about this. But a really fun community conversation. A shout out to Daniel and Gene for all the more technical recommendations there. And I like how there's a lot of us at different skill levels on the marketing side, on the tech side, on all kinds of sides of this business. And this community is welcome to one and all. So yeah, Porch.capital to learn more about David Levy and stay in touch with him. And his Substack is really good. It's like, I often need to not read it the second it comes out, because I need to be able to sit somewhere where I can process it. So
I write long form.
That's a compliment. But follow him on LinkedIn, all this stuff. Next week we have Ad Age's chief technology reporter, Garrett Sloan. So another great observer of the market. You'll be able to ask some way better questions too that I'm sure I can think of. So thanks everyone for coming. Hope it's a great rest of your week, and see you next week and in Slack and everywhere else. Thanks everyone.